Hello and welcome. You are listening to Digital Pulse.
Today, we're diving deep.
Into the core principles of nutritional science.
Going beyond.
The usual diet fads and quick fixes.
Right. Dissecting a manuscript that's like a cheat sheet.
For understanding nutrition.
Yeah.
This deep dive is all about equipping you.
With the tools to make informed decisions about your health and well-being.
It's about building a foundation of knowledge.
So you're not swayed by every flashy headline or trendy diet that comes along.
Exactly.
This isn't about telling you what to eat.
But rather giving you the power to critically evaluate nutritional information yourself.
And speaking of critical evaluation,
this manuscript starts by reminding us of how science actually works.
That whole process of asking questions, testing hypotheses, and drawing evidence-based conclusions.
Okay.
Back to basics.
It's like a refresher course on the scientific method.
But why is that so important?
In the context of nutrition.
Because the field of nutrition
is absolutely flooded with information.
Some accurate, some not so much.
Having a solid understanding of how scientific evidence
is gathered and evaluated helps you separate the wheat from the chaff, so to speak.
So it's like
having a BS detector for all those nutrition claims out there.
Precisely.
The manuscript even provides a handy tool for this very purpose.
The CRAP.
CRAP test.
Okay, I have to admit the name is a little,
well, crappy.
But I'm intrigued.
What is it?
And how can we actually use it?
It stands for currency, relevance, authority, accuracy.
And purpose.
Let's say you come across an article claiming that a certain supplement
can dramatically boost your metabolism.
The CRAP test would guide you to consider.
Is the information up to date?
Is it relevant to your specific goals?
Who's the author and what are their credentials?
Is the information supported by evidence?
And finally, what's the purpose of this article?
Is it to inform or to sell you something?
So it's about
being a discerning consumer of information.
Asking those tough questions before accepting anything at face value.
I like it.
Now, the manuscript also mentions this thing called the hierarchy of evidence.
What's that all about?
Imagine a pyramid.
At the very bottom, you have anecdotes and personal opinions.
Things like, my aunt's friend lost 20 pounds on this diet.
Moving up, you have case studies, then observational studies, then randomized controlled trials.
And right at the top, the gold standard are meta-analyses and systematic reviews.
So it's a ranking system.
For the strength of scientific evidence.
With the stuff at the top being the most trustworthy.
Exactly.
The higher you go on the pyramid, the more rigorous the research and the stronger the evidence.
The manuscript even points out that while documentaries can be informative,
they're still lower on the hierarchy compared to a meta-analysis,
which analyzes data from multiple studies.
That makes sense.
It's about understanding the different levels of scientific evidence.
And not treating all sources as equally valid.
But here's a question. This manuscript is all about evidence-based practice.
But it emphasizes that it's not just about the science.
What else is involved?
Well, imagine you have a perfectly designed weight loss program.
Backed by solid research.
But the person following it hates the food, can't afford the supplements.
And finds the workouts boring.
What happens?
They quit.
Evidence-based practice considers not just the science,
but also the individual needs and preferences of the person.
And the practical realities of applying that knowledge in the real world. Having all the best ingredients, but not knowing how to cook.
You need that practical know-how to create something delicious and satisfying.
Precisely.
And the manuscript even provides some practical tips.
Like speaking in the third person when offering advice.
Instead of saying, I think you should try, research suggests or studies have shown.
That's a great tip.
Especially for anyone in a coaching or advisory role.
It's about shifting the focus from personal opinions to the weight of evidence.
Now let's get into the nitty-gritty of nutrition.
Those macronutrients we all hear about.
Carbs, proteins, and fats.
The building blocks of our diet.
And the manuscript dives into how these are categorized scientifically.
Carbs, for example,
are classified as monosaccharides, disaccharides, or polysaccharides.
But here's something to chew on.
From a metabolic standpoint, our bodies don't discriminate.
Between sugar from a piece of fruit and sugar from a candy bar.
It's all glucose and fructose at the end of the day.
So that myth about fruit sugar being good
and candy sugar being bad is busted.
Let's just say it's more nuanced than that.
It's the total amount of sugar consumed regardless of the source.
That matters most.
Okay, that's a myth debunked right off the bat.
Now, I'm always fascinated by those mind-blowing facts that science throws our way.
Did this manuscript have any of those?
Oh, absolutely.
For instance,
did you know that the average adult body
can store a staggering 100,000 to 110,000 calories worth of fat?
Wow.
That's like running multiple marathons back to back.
But wait, there's more to fat than just storage, right?
You're right.
There's white fat, the kind we usually think of.
Which stores energy, insulates our organs, and acts as a cushion.
But then there's brown fat.
A metabolically active type of fat.
That actually burns calories to generate heat.
So we have fat that stores energy.
And fat that burns energy.
That's wild.
It is.
Unfortunately, we only have a tiny amount of brown fat
Maybe a few ounces.
compared to pounds of white fat.
Researchers are actually exploring ways to increase brown fat activity.
As it could have implications for weight management.
Imagine if we could turn up the heat on our brown fat.
That would be a game changer.
But back to the manuscript.
How does it help us translate all this knowledge into actionable steps?
It provides a framework for understanding concepts like the glycemic index and glycemic load GL,
You've probably heard of GI.
which ranks foods based on how quickly they raise blood sugar levels,
Right, so white bread has a high GI.
while brown rice has a lower GI.
Exactly.
But the manuscript emphasizes that GL gives you a more complete picture.
Because it factors in portion size.
So a small serving of a high GI food
Might have a lower GL than a large serving of a low GI food.
That-
It's not just what you eat
but also how much you eat.
that affects your blood sugar response.
Okay, portion control is key.
What else does this manuscript cover in terms of practical application?
It delves into protein quality.
Explaining this thing called the DIA score.
It's a measure of how well our bodies can digest and absorb the amino acids.
From different protein sources,
Complete proteins like those found in animal products.
score higher because they contain all the essential amino acids our bodies need.
So when it comes to building muscle or recovering from exercise,
Not all proteins are created equal.
exactly.
The quality matters.
And speaking of essential nutrients, the manuscript also tackles those omega fatty acids.
That everyone's always talking about.
The good fats.
Right, omega-3s and omega-6s.
But aren't they both good for us?
Well, it's all about balance.
Both play roles in inflammation.
But omega-6s are more pro-inflammatory, while omega-3s are anti-inflammatory.
Too much omega-6.
And not enough omega-3 could be a problem.
Precisely.
And here's the catch.
The typical Western diet is overloaded with omega-6s,
From things like vegetable oils and processed foods,
while omega-3s
found in fatty fish and flax seeds.
are often lacking.
Yikes.
So even if we're choosing healthy fats,
We still need to be mindful of this ratio.
that's a great example of how this manuscript is all about digging deeper.
And not just accepting surface-level information.
It encourages us to be critical thinkers.
And savvy consumers of nutrition information.
I'm loving this.
Okay, I have to ask.
Did the manuscript debunk any major nutrition myths?
Oh, for sure.
One that stood out was about dietary cholesterol
For years, we were told that eating cholesterol-rich foods, like eggs.
would raise our blood cholesterol levels and increase our risk of heart disease.
Right.
I remember egg white omelets being all the rage.
But new research shows that dietary cholesterol,
It's a minimal impact on blood cholesterol levels.
our bodies actually produce most of the cholesterol we need.
The manuscript even cites updated guidelines that have eased up on egg consumption.
Even for those watching their cholesterol.
Wow, talk about a misconception that's been hard to crack.
It just goes to show that nutritional science is constantly evolving.
What we thought was true yesterday might be outdated today.
That's why it's so important to stay informed and rely on credible sources.
Absolutely.
We're only scratching the surface here.
But it's clear that this manuscript is packed with valuable insights.
What other areas does it cover?
It dives into the world of micronutrients.
Vitamins and minerals,
These might be needed in smaller amounts.
but they're essential for all sorts of bodily functions.
It also explores the gut microbiome
That fascinating ecosystem of bacteria living in our intestines.
and the roles of probiotics and prebiotics in supporting gut health.
The gut microbiome is definitely having its moment in the spotlight.
It's a hot topic for a reason.
There's growing evidence that the gut microbiome plays a role in everything.
From digestion and immunity to mental health and even weight management.
It's like we have a whole universe living inside of us.
And we're just beginning to understand its complexity.
The manuscript also touches upon some often debated topics.
Like organic food GMOs and alcohol.
Ooh. Those are always good for a lively discussion.
What's the manuscript's take on organic food?
It explains the concept of organic certification and the standards involved.
But it also highlights a key research finding.
There's little nutritional difference between organic and conventionally grown foods.
So the organic label might be more about farming practices and environmental impact.
The nutritional superiority.
Precisely.
Now, GMOs are another area where there's a lot of fear and misinformation.
Wow.
The whole Frankenfoods narrative.
Exactly.
The manuscript takes a more evidence-based approach.
It explains what GMOs are and cites a comprehensive report
By the National Academy of Sciences.
that found no evidence of harm from GMOs.
Interesting.
So while there are valid concerns about the long-term impact of GMOs,
The current scientific consensus is that they're safe to eat.
that's a fair summary.
And lastly, the manuscript addresses alcohol.
Yes, the double-edged sword.
What insights does it offer?
It discusses alcohol's caloric content.
The concept of a standard drink and the guidelines for moderate consumption.
It also highlights the fact that women tend to metabolize alcohol differently than men.
Meaning they're more susceptible to its effects.
So ladies, pace yourself.
Wise advice.
We've covered a lot of ground here.
But this is just the beginning of our exploration of nutritional science principles
I'm already feeling more informed and empowered.
to navigate the often confusing world of nutrition.
That's exactly the goal.
Stay tuned because we'll be back with part 2.
To delve deeper into the fascinating world of energy balance and metabolism.
Welcome back.
Now that we've laid the groundwork,
Let's shift gears and explore the fascinating world of energy balance and metabolism.
concepts that are often shrouded in myths and misconceptions.
Ah, yes. The calorie equation.
It's like the fundamental law of weight management, right?
Precisely.
The manuscript delves into the very definition of energy.
The capacity to do work,
It explains how energy can be expressed in various forms.
like heat, light, or mechanical motion.
Think of it as the driving force behind everything that happens in the universe.
From the smallest cells to the largest stars.
Okay, so energy is what makes things happen.
It's what powers our bodies, our cars, our entire world.
Exactly.
And in the context of nutrition.
When we talk about calories, we're talking about a unit of energy.
So a calorie is a measure of how much energy is stored in a particular food or drink.
But I've always wondered, how do scientists actually measure those calories?
Do they set the food on fire and see how much heat it produces?
That's a great question.
And you're not far off.
They use a technique called direct calorimetry.
Which involves burning a food sample in a controlled environment and measuring the heat released.
It's like a tiny incinerator for food.
That's pretty cool.
But obviously we can't burn humans to measure their calorie expenditure.
So how do they figure out how many calories we burn?
For that, they use a method called indirect calorimetry.
Which measures oxygen consumption.
The principle is simple.
The more oxygen we use, the more calories we burn.
It's like a fire.
The more oxygen it gets, the hotter and brighter it burns.
Makes sense.
We need oxygen to break down fuel for energy.
Just like a fire needs oxygen to burn.
Now, I remember seeing those calorie counts on food labels.
How do they calculate those?
Is there some magic formula?
Well, they use these average values called Atwater factors.
Which represent the number of calories per gram of each macronutrient.
Carbs, protein, and fat.
You've probably heard them before.
4 calories per gram for carbs and protein, and 9 calories per gram for fat.
Oh yeah, those numbers are ingrained in my brain.
They're pretty fundamental.
The manuscript explains that while these values aren't perfectly precise for every single food.
They're widely used to estimate calorie content, which is why you see them on nutrition labels.
Okay, so those calorie counts on food labels
are based on these Atwater factors.
But let's move on to metabolism.
A word that gets thrown around a lot but is often misunderstood.
People talk about having a fast or slow metabolism.
As if it's some magical force controlling their weight.
What's the real story?
The manuscript sets the record straight.
Explaining that metabolism is simply the sum of all the chemical reactions that occur within our bodies.
To keep us alive and functioning.
It's not just about burning calories.
It's about everything from breathing to digesting food to repairing tissues.
It's a continuous process that's happening 24/7 even when we're asleep.
So it's like our bodies are constantly buzzing with activity.
Even when we're not consciously doing anything.
Exactly.
And the manuscript breaks down metabolism into 2 main categories.
Anabolism and catabolism.
Okay, break those down for us.
What's the difference?
Think of anabolism as the building up phase.
It's like construction.
Using energy to create new molecules and tissues.
Like when we're building muscle after a workout.
Catabolism, on the other hand, is the breaking down phase, like demolition.
It releases energy by breaking down molecules.
Such as when we're digesting food or using stored fat for energy.
So it's a constant cycle of building up and breaking down.
Like a dance between creation and destruction happening inside our bodies all the time.
A beautifully orchestrated dance.
And both anabolism and catabolism are essential for life.
Now let's bring calories back into the picture.
How does metabolism relate to energy balance?
Energy balance is the relationship between the energy we take in through food.
And the energy we expend through metabolism and physical activity.
So if we consume more calories than we burn,
We're in a state of positive energy balance and we gain weight.
and if we burn more than we consume,
It's a negative energy balance and we lose weight.
it's as simple as that.
In essence, yes.
The key to maintaining a healthy weight is finding that balance over time.
And that's where understanding our metabolic rate comes in.
Okay, so metabolic rate is basically how many calories our bodies burn at rest,
That's part of it.
called resting metabolic rate, or RMR.
But our total energy expenditure is actually made up of three components:
RMR.
the thermic effect of food, or TEF.
And the thermic effect of physical activity, or TIPA.
Okay, let's break those down.
RMR is the energy we burn just keeping our bodies running.
Breathing circulating blood, keeping our organs functioning.
That's like the baseline energy our bodies need just to exist.
Exactly.
And it accounts for the majority of our daily energy expenditure,
Then there's TEF.
which is the energy we use to digest, absorb, and process the food we eat.
So even eating burns calories.
You got it.
It's like a metabolic tax on our meals,
And finally, there's TIPA.
which is all the calories we burn through exercise movement and general daily activity.
So TIPA is everything from hitting the gym.
To walking the dog, to fidgeting at our desks.
Precisely.
And the manuscript emphasizes that while exercise is important,
It's actually neat.
non-exercise activity thermogenesis.
That can significantly impact our overall energy expenditure.
Yeek.
That's all the movement we do outside of structured exercise.
Things like walking, taking the stairs, doing chores, even just standing up more throughout the day.
Exactly.
Small increases in movement can add up to a substantial calorie burn over time.
So even if we can't make it to the gym every day,
We can still boost our metabolism by simply moving more throughout the day.
that's encouraging.
But how do we actually figure out our total energy expenditure, or T?
Are those online calorie calculators accurate?
The manuscript explains that while those calculators can give you a rough estimate,
They're often based on generalized formulas and can be inaccurate.
especially for people who are very active or have unique metabolic profiles,
So take those online calculators with a grain of salt.
or maybe a side of veggies.
What about more precise methods for measuring T?
There are more sophisticated methods like measuring oxygen consumption,
Or using a special chamber called a calorimeter?
but those are typically done in research settings
Okay, so for most of us, it's about being aware of the factors.
that influence our T and making conscious choices to support a healthy metabolism.
But can we actually boost our metabolic rate?
Is there a way to make our bodies burn more calories?
The manuscript dives into some evidence-based strategies.
It starts by emphasizing that our metabolic rate is influenced by various factors.
Some within our control and some not.
So things like age, genetics, and gender play a role.
But we still have some power to nudge our metabolic rate in the right direction.
Absolutely.
The manuscript highlights some key areas we can focus on, like building muscle mass.
Managing stress and getting enough sleep.
Okay, let's unpack those.
How does building muscle boost our metabolism?
Muscle is metabolically active tissue.
Meaning it burns calories even at rest.
So the more muscle mass we have,
The higher our resting metabolic rate, even when we're just lounging on the couch.
so hitting the weights isn't just about getting toned.
It's about stoking our metabolic fire.
Exactly.
Now let's talk about stress.
Chronic stress can wreak havoc on our metabolism.
I know stress can lead to overeating and unhealthy food choices.
But how does it directly affect our metabolic rate?
When we're stressed, our bodies release a hormone called cortisol.
Often dubbed the stress hormone.
Cortisol.
I've definitely heard of that.
Cortisol has a number of effects on the body.
Including increasing blood sugar levels and suppressing the immune system.
And here's the kicker.
Chronically elevated cortisol levels can actually lower our resting metabolic rate.
So stress isn't just bad for our mental health.
It's bad for our metabolism, too.
It's a double whammy.
And then there's sleep.
Getting enough quality sleep is crucial for a healthy metabolism.
I've definitely noticed that when I'm sleep deprived, I crave all the sugary and fatty foods.
That's your body trying to get a quick energy boost,
The manuscript explains that lack of sleep can disrupt our hormone balance.
leading to increased appetite and cravings,
It can also decrease our insulin sensitivity.
making it harder for our bodies to use glucose for energy efficiently.
So skimping on sleep,
Can actually make us more resistant to insulin.
which can lead to weight gain and other metabolic issues.
It's a domino effect.
And speaking of hormones, the manuscript dives into some fascinating research.
On the role of hormones in fat metabolism.
It explains how hormones like epinephrine, norepinephrine, and even cortisol.
which are released during times of stress, can stimulate the breakdown of stored fat
Wait, those stress hormones we were just talking about?
and can actually help us burn fat.
That seems counterintuitive.
All about context.
During acute stress, like exercise, these hormones help mobilize fat for energy.
But chronic stress, as we discussed.
Can have the opposite effect, leading to fat storage and a slower metabolism.
Okay, so short bursts of stress, like a challenging workout, can be beneficial.
But prolonged stress is a metabolic no-no.
Precisely.
The manuscript emphasizes the importance of managing stress through techniques like exercise.
Meditation and spending time in nature.
It also highlights the importance of getting enough sleep, as this helps regulate our hormone balance.
And keeps cortisol levels in check.
So managing stress and getting enough sleep are essential.
Not just for our mental well-being, but for our metabolic health as well.
It's all interconnected.
We've talked about the science behind nutrition, the calorie equation, and how our metabolism works.
But I'm curious about the actual process of digestion.
How does our body break down all that food and absorb those nutrients we need?
It seems like a pretty complex operation.
It is a remarkable process.
A symphony of organs, enzymes, and hormones working in perfect harmony.
The manuscript actually takes us on a fascinating journey.
Through the digestive tract, starting with the first bite.
And ending with, well,
Okay, let's follow that food journey.
it starts in the mouth, right?
Exactly.
We mechanically break down food by chewing.
Mixing it with saliva, which contains enzymes that kickstart the digestion process.
And it travels down the esophagus to the stomach.
Where things get really churned up.
The stomach is like a powerful mixing chamber,
It churns the food with gastric juices.
which are highly acidic and contain enzymes specifically designed to break down proteins,
So the stomach is like a high-powered blender.
breaking down those proteins into smaller pieces.
But isn't it super acidic in there?
How does our stomach not digest itself?
It's a good question.
The stomach lining has a protective layer of mucus that prevents the acid from damaging the tissue.
But sometimes that protective barrier can be compromised, leading to ulcers.
That doesn't sound fun.
Okay, so the food gets pulverized in the stomach.
Where does it go next?
From the stomach, the partially digested food
Now called chyme.
moves into the small intestine.
Ah, the small intestine.
That's where the real magic happens, right?
I've heard that's where most of the nutrient absorption takes place.
Exactly.
The small intestine is where the majority of vitamins, minerals.
And other nutrients get absorbed into the bloodstream.
It's a long, winding tube, about 20 feet long,
And it's lined with these tiny finger-like projections called villi,
which increase its surface area, maximizing absorption.
20 feet long.
Wow, that's a lot of intestine packed into our abdomen.
So it's like a giant sponge soaking up all the good stuff.
A very efficient sponge.
And the small intestine receives help from other organs.
The pancreas releases enzymes that break down carbohydrates, fats, and proteins,
While the gallbladder releases bile.
which helps emulsify fats, making them easier to digest.
It's amazing how all these different organs work together to break down our food and extract those essential nutrients.
But what about the stuff that doesn't get absorbed in the small intestine?
Where does that go?
It moves on to the large intestine,
Also known as the colon.
which is primarily responsible for absorbing water and electrolytes,
So the large intestine is like the last stop on the nutrient train.
making sure we squeeze out every last drop of hydration and those important minerals,
And whatever is left over at that point forms into feces.
and is eliminated from the body.
Well, that's the end of that journey.
It's incredible how efficient and intricate the whole digestive process is.
It truly is a marvel of nature.
And the manuscript also highlights the crucial role of our gut microbiome.
In digestion and overall health.
Ah, yes, the gut microbiome.
That bustling community of bacteria living in our intestines.
Those trillions of tiny organisms are more than just passengers
They're actively involved in breaking down certain types of fiber.
that our bodies can't digest on their own,
So they're like our microscopic digestion buddies.
helping us get the most out of our food.
Exactly.
They also produce certain vitamins, like vitamin K.
Which is essential for blood clotting.
It's like a symbiotic relationship.
We provide them with a home, and they help us stay healthy.
Precisely.
And the manuscript emphasizes the importance of nourishing our gut microbiome.
With prebiotic fibers found in foods like fruits, vegetables, and whole grains.
So a diverse and fiber-rich diet isn't just good for us.
It's good for our trillions of tiny gut buddies.
What a fascinating world living inside of us.
It is.
And this brings our deep dive into the principles of nutritional science to a close.
Wow, this has been such an eye-opening journey.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how my body works.
And what it needs to thrive.
I can't wait to put this knowledge into action and make some positive changes.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Understanding these principles empowers you to make informed decisions.
About your nutrition and health rather than being swayed by fads or quick fixes.
Thank you for joining us. Share our podcast and, of course, like and subscribe.